This is Lisa Moore Ramée, and my book, A Good Kind of Trouble, is available right now, and you're listening to So Booking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. It's Joe B. Get ready to listen to part 2 of my conversation with author Lisa Moore Ramée, only right here on So Booking Cool.
Wow. Well, first of all, congratulations on the second book.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. I'm so glad because I was going to ask if you are writing another one, so that's awesome to hear. When did that decision come about, and how do you feel, and what can you say anything about the second book yet or no?
I think it was so when A Good Kind of Trouble sold to Balzer and Bray, it was part of a 2-book deal. So I always knew that there was going to be another book. And it was a little bit scary because, I had not complete free reign, but like when a book is already sold, you do have this idea of like, well, I can write kind of almost whatever I want. and they've already bought it. So let's go. And for some authors, they're in the position of like, well, they already have, other manuscripts that they have written that they can say like, this will be the second book. And I do have other manuscripts that I've written, but none that seemed like a logical choice to follow A Good Kind of Trouble. So as soon as I knew that I had another book to do, I started working on that second book. And I had this one paragraph in my computer about this girl, Jenae, who I wanted to develop her story further. It was just a couple of lines about this girl who didn't have any friends and didn't want any friends and was cool with herself the way that she was. And I started writing her story, and that's going to be the second book. And she's totally different from Shayla. Pretty much the only thing that they have in common are they are both 7th grade black girls. And because Shayla loves her friends and Jenae's like, nope, friends are weird and hard and difficult, and I don't need that kind of drama in my life. And then a new boy comes to school, and for whatever reason, he decides that she would be an excellent friend and is not going to take her unwillingness to have a friend, as an answer, and decides like, hey, we're going to be friends. I did not know that she was going to be a girl who is terrified of public speaking, but she is, and that became kind of the cornerstone of the story of how her fear of public speaking has the potential to destroy the first and only friendship that she has. So totally different story, but I really enjoyed writing it. And I was really, really lucky that I decided to write it when I did, before I had any type of voices in my head about A Good Kind of Trouble. Because I finished it before, I finished the first draft of it, I should say, before A Good Kind of Trouble came out.
Wow. Well, it sounds like a must read. Definitely. And I think it's hitting a lot of really important and really interesting topics. Would you say that this character is introverted or?
She is, but she's also, it's funny because I was trying to get the word odd into the title, and that isn't going to happen because nobody else likes that idea, because she is odd, and she describes herself that way. She's like, yes, I am odd. I am different. She's like, odd just means different, and she is, and she's quiet and reserved, and but she definitely has strong opinions. But she just doesn't like talking to people she doesn't know, and she doesn't like having to get up in front of people and talk. And one of the things that came about in the story, and this is kind of refers back to my process, which isn't a process at all, of like, I just write along and see what happens, is that as I was writing and making some decisions and deciding where she was going to school, suddenly, she was going to a school called John Wayne Junior High, and the school is embroiled in people wanting to change the name of the school and change it to Sylvia Mendez Junior High. And I thought, this is another great opportunity of talking about this issue that sometimes gets really confusing, particularly for young people, of like, why does someone have to be held accountable to something that they may have done or said in the past? And do they have to be guilty for those things? Do we have to pass judgment on them if it was a long time ago? At the time that I was working on the book, there was, a lot of talk about, should there be statues in states celebrating Confederate soldiers, and I think it's such a really good debate for young people to be part of and listening to and understanding history. And so I was like, well, look, I can sneak a little bit of that into this book. And it'll, on one hand, it's just about this girl and her wanting to be left alone. But it's also has this small message about, maybe we should look at what people have done and said in the past and wonder whether or not they should have the same honor, attributed to them, now that they had in the past. If they were, maybe they shouldn't be honored in the same way. I think it's a question that we need to ask.
That is so timely too. Well, it's stuff like this is always relevant to talk about, right? Would you say, Lisa?
I think so. So. And it's one of those things where it's like a lot of these conversations have been going on, for years, for decades, but not as much on the public stage as they have more recently. I think with things like the musical Hamilton, being done, like just making, people starting to become more aware, or I should say non-people of color becoming more aware of some things. It's like I live in California, and there's, such a celebration of missions, and, there's been voices for ever, it seems like, about the fact that maybe we shouldn't be celebrating missions, maybe teaching elementary school kids that this was some wonderful thing that was done to Native Americans is not so wonderful. And then it's like finally enough voices were maybe loud enough or touch people where people are starting to go, oh yeah, hey, yeah, this isn't necessarily a bright spot of history. So hopefully the voices will continue to grow. I know that it's hard for people sometimes to have to face up to someone that is beloved, may have said some things that were sexist or racist or what have you, but pretending that they didn't is never going to be the answer.
So, Lisa, one of the things that we discussed before we actually started the interview was that you do work full-time and you also are an author. So what is it like trying to balance that out and find creative time? And what advice can you give to other writers about this? It is tricky.
Interestingly, I was not working full-time up until 2 years ago. It was, I started looking for a job because I was working part-time, and I felt almost, I didn't have an agent yet. I spent most of my day writing, and I was starting to feel like I was maybe almost spending too much of my time just spinning my wheels a little bit. And so I started working at the same time that I sold my book. Like, so it was an odd set of circumstances, but it's in a lot of ways it's helpful. You know, like I think that some advice I would give to other writers is find something else that you do. It doesn't have to be a full-time job, but have something else that you do that has nothing to do with writing, because I think having times of writing can be really frustrating. You can be blocked, or you can just be, you know, the words are coming out, but they're wrong and not working. And you sometimes just need to be able to pause and go to something else. But if you don't have something else to go to, that can be even more frustrating. So my job is one that, you know, I love. I work with great people. At the same time, it's not a high stress job. I would also recommend you don't like to have something like that. But it's just, you know, it's low key. I support a group of advisors that work with undergraduate students, and it's like the perfect opportunity for me. But it means that when I'm in drafting mode and I kind of have what feels like a lot of time, almost all the time in the world, I will sometimes work before I go to work. I'll squeeze in a half an hour. I take a commuter bus and I'll sometimes work on the bus. It's about an hour and 15-minute ride. But truly where I do my most work is on the weekends. And that's because my children are older. My husband is very understanding of my writing life, and he's also away from his professional life. He is a high school basketball coach, so he totally gets having other passions and interests, and can, you know, be by himself and not think that I'm, you know, like not involved in our relationship if I spend all day, you know, on Saturday and Sunday writing. And that's kind of what I do. And if I'm on deadline, I will spend, you know, 10, 12 hours on Saturday and on Sunday getting the work done. And, you know, I've heard other authors talk about just, you know, doing work every morning before work. You know, but it's hard. It's hard having the time to do both things. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to go back to not having something else. I could see one day in the future, maybe going like, oh, okay, you know, maybe a part-time job would be better if I had more than one project in a year, because that could start getting a little bit tighter schedule-wise. But right now, looking at, you know, doing one book a year, it's manageable within my schedule.
So, all in all, how long have you been writing, Lisa?
I've been writing for a long time. As far as really, truly, like, trying to, like, work and get published, it's been, I would say, gosh, over 20 years. Which sounds really sad now when I say it out loud, like, dang, it took a long time. But, yeah, when I first started writing, I was trying to, you know, I thought, oh, I'll do articles for magazines. And so that's what I was doing a lot of, like submitting a lot of magazine articles and racking up rejections with that. And then I took a long time off, you know, after I had kids and was dealing with them and not even thinking about it. But when I got back to it was about 10 years ago. And that's when I decided to go back to school and get a master's in English literature. And it reminded me that writing was something I've loved to do. And I figured, you know, why not try to write a book?
Awesome, because I want to also know it was quite a journey to getting A Good Kind of Trouble published, because as you mentioned, you had already had the idea for this. It was already, you were already working on it. And I want to know, because some authors, they get discouraged, especially when they're getting rejected. So Lisa, what kept you going? What kept you motivated?
It was, I didn't ever feel like I had that much of a choice other than to keep going. Part of it too, when I started, because it was a long time ago, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't this kind of online writing community. So I was writing just, kind of by myself. I mean, when I started submitting to agents, it was through, just the U.S. mail. Like, people weren't even accepting queries via email back in those days, so it was just very solitary. And so I didn't even have a sense of like, is this something that takes a long time? Is this something that is easy? I don't know. And so by the time I started meeting other people, I went to a SBWI conference, about, 6 years ago maybe, and realized like, oh, this is something a lot of people do. And I also heard stories of people who, had been working and trying to get an agent and get published for a really long time. So my story didn't seem at all that weird. And the message that I heard over and over from other people were that the people who make it are the ones who don't give up. That's the difference. And so I thought, I don't want to, at the end of the day, go like, well, I never realized this dream because I just stopped trying. And I went to, I have to give a shout out to the author, Tracy Chee, because I went to a talk at a library, and her debut, The Reader, was about to come out, and she talked about her writing journey and how she said something like she decided to treat it like a job. She knew how to do that, where it's like, look, there are steps you take, you do the work, you research agents, treat it like this is your job. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Tracy's advice and, stop treating this like, oh, maybe it'll happen, and just be like, this is my job. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to query every single agent who exists that represents middle grade or YA books, and I'm going to find somebody. And I did, it was just the thing of like, it eventually, it took a lot of work and getting, I started getting input from people that were giving me reasons of why it wasn't quite right. And I was willing to listen to that. And it seemed like I was so close that I had to keep going.
And on that note, Lisa Moore Ramée. Oh my God, Lisa, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I really loved it.
Much. Oh, thank you, Jill, so much.
You're very welcome.
It's been great.
I'm truly glad. Like, authors, I didn't even really need to ask Lisa for advice for you all. I'm sure there's so much, listeners in general, writers, whatever creative space that you're in, there is definitely a lot to learn from Lisa and, your journey and everything, Lisa. So thank you for sharing,
Oh, you're very welcome.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. I would love to talk to you again in the future. Like, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So how can people keep up with you and get A Good Kind of Trouble in the next book and all of that?
Okay, well, on social media, I am at Leesray, which is Leeseray, which people are like, why isn't it your name? But it's just because, I don't know, I have a friend who calls me that, Lisa Ramée, Leesray. It makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
So that's on Twitter and Instagram. My website is just lisamoreramée.com. And you can find A Good Kind of Trouble at your local indie. You can find it online. You can find it at Barnes and Noble. It's readily available. It's probably on sale somewhere. So
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you to all the listeners. Until next time, so booking cool.